They started dividing my ranch before dessert. Not quietly, not in another room, right there at my own dining table. Daniel had a yellow legal pad out like he was running a board meeting. Laura had her laptop open with property listings pulled up. Emily was tapping numbers into a calculator, whispering about long-term appreciation. I was still holding my coffee, still breathing, still sitting at the head of the table, still very much alive. At first, I thought I misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about taxes. Maybe estate planning in the abstract. Something normal, responsible. Then Daniel said, clear as day, we should move fast once everything transfers. Everything transfers. I felt something shift inside my chest. Laura leaned over the table and said, the North pasture alone could bring in 8 figures if we parcel it correctly. Parcel it correctly. That land has been in our family 42 years. I remember bottle feeding calves out there. I remember burying my husband under the oak that stands at the edge of that pasture. And my children were discussing it like a spreadsheet. Emily didn't even look up when she added, if Mom sets up the paperwork now, probate will be cleaner. If Mom sets it up. That's when it hit me. They weren't talking about someday. They were talking about me like I was paperwork. Like I was a delay. An obstacle. A form that hadn't been signed yet. And the worst part? They weren't arguing. They were organized, calm, prepared, strategic, like they'd rehearsed it. I sat there, listening to my own children plan the future of a ranch I still run every single morning. And not one of them asked me what I wanted. Not one.
Welcome to Life Voices, where family drama turns into late-life justice. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from.
For 42 years, that ranch has been my life. Not a hobby, not an asset, my life. When my husband and I bought the first 600 acres, we didn't even have a proper roof on the house. We had tarps. We had a borrowed tractor. We had debt that made my stomach twist every night. We didn't have heirs waiting on square footage. We had blisters. I remember branding season when I was 8 months pregnant with Daniel. I remember hauling feed in the freezing rain because the hired help quit midwinter. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with ledgers spread out, calculating whether we could afford diesel for 1 more week. Every acre was earned, slow, painful, sacrificed for. Over the years we grew. 1 ranch became 2, 2 became 3. We negotiated cattle contracts. We leased mineral rights. When oil companies came knocking, I sat across from men who didn't think a woman belonged at the table, and I out-negotiated them anyway. When my husband died 12 years ago, every deed transferred into my name. Every signature, every liability, every decision. My children know that. They've known it since the funeral. And yet that night, sitting at my table, they didn't speak to me like an owner. They spoke like investors waiting for a payout. Laura swiveled her laptop toward Daniel. If we list the West Tract first, she said, we can use that liquidity to leverage development on the South End. Liquidity, development, that, South End, is where my husband taught Emily to ride. It's where Chris proposed to Laura under the cottonwoods. It's where my grandchildren hunt Easter eggs every spring. But to them, it was a strategy. I cleared my throat once. No one paused. Emily added, and once Mom steps back from operations, we can bring in professional management. Steps back. Professional management. I wake up at 4:45 every morning. I review feed orders before breakfast. I still walk the barns. But apparently I'm something that needs to step back. Daniel finally looked at me, not with warmth, not with concern. With calculation. Mom, you've done more than enough. You should enjoy what's left. Let us handle the heavy lifting. What's left? I'm 68, not 98, not confused, not incompetent. 68. I felt something cold settle into my bones. This wasn't about helping me. This was about positioning themselves. I studied their faces. They weren't malicious. They weren't even angry. They were entitled. That's what scared me most. They weren't plotting in secret like criminals. They were planning openly like beneficiaries. Laura reached across the table and patted my hand. We just want to make sure everything transitions smoothly when the time comes. When the time comes. As if my death were a scheduled event. As if I were a calendar reminder. I withdrew my hand slowly. I'm not transitioning anywhere, I said evenly. Daniel chuckled like I'd made a joke. No one's saying that, Mom. But that's exactly what they were saying. Just without using the word. I watched them continue, dividing acreage, estimating valuations, talking about conservation easements and tax shelters. Like I was already gone. And for the first time in my life, sitting at that table I had paid for, in a house I had built, on land I had fought to protect. I realized something ugly. I hadn't raised partners. I had raised heirs. The first real crack showed 3 nights later. I couldn't sleep. That doesn't happen to me often. Ranch life teaches you to fall asleep fast and wake up faster. But that night my mind kept replaying their voices. Liquidity, transfer, management, timeline. Around midnight, I walked down the hallway for a glass of water. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the old floorboards settling. That's when I heard it. Whispering. From Daniel's old bedroom, the one he uses when he stays over. The door was almost closed. Almost. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I really didn't. But when you hear your own name in a hushed tone, you stop walking. Emily's voice first. If she signs the restructuring before year-end, capital gains exposure drops. Restructuring, Daniel answered, low and steady. She'll resist if we push too hard. We need to frame it as protecting her. Protecting me, Laura chimed in softly, the appraisal we ordered should help. Once she sees the number, she'll understand. Appraisal. I felt my stomach drop. They'd ordered an appraisal of my ranch. Without telling me, I leaned closer before I could stop myself. Chris said, and what about the loan? Loan. Silence. Then Emily again. It's temporary. I used my projected share as leverage. The bank's fine with it as long as we show pending transfer. My projected share, leverage, my land, used as collateral. While I'm alive, I had to grip the hallway wall to steady myself. Daniel's voice tightened. You should have told us before you signed anything. I needed the cash flow, Emily shot back in a whisper. It's not like she's going to live forever. The words didn't sound cruel. They sounded practical. That was worse. I stepped back slowly, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Not live forever. No one lives forever. But most children don't start borrowing against your death. I went back to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me. My hands stopped shaking, and something else started. Clarity. I replayed every moment from Sunday dinner. The organized notes, the color-coded maps, the confidence. This wasn't spontaneous. This was coordinated. They weren't waiting to inherit. They were counting on it. And worse, they were financially entangled in it. If Emily defaulted on that loan, what then? Would a bank come after ranch land? Would liens be placed on property? Would my legacy become someone else's leverage tool? I walked to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were copies of every deed, every mineral agreement, every trust document drafted years ago but never finalized. I had delayed formal estate structuring because I believed in something old-fashioned. Trust. I trusted my children to respect timing. I trusted them not to monetize me. I was wrong. Around 1:30 a.m., my phone felt heavier than usual in my hand. I scrolled to one name. Harold Benson, my attorney for 20 years. He's the kind of man who speaks slowly and charges by the hour, but never wastes a word. I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I opened my calendar. I had a meeting with the feed supplier Tuesday morning. Oil representative Wednesday. Cattle contract renewal Friday. Life was still happening. Business was still running. And my children were quietly drafting my exit plan in the next room. I lay back in bed and stared into the darkness. I didn't feel rage, not even hurt, exactly. What I felt was a shift. A dividing line. Before this week, I believed blood guaranteed loyalty. After tonight, I understood something colder. Blood guarantees access. Respect has to be earned. And I wasn't about to let my life's work become collateral for someone else's impatience. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just hadn't decided how much it was going to cost them. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just hadn't decided how much it was going to cost them. The house was quiet when I walked out onto the porch. The sky was still gray, that soft Texas gray that rolls over the fields before the sun burns it off. Cattle were already moving near the east fence line. They don't wait for inheritance. They wait for feed. I poured grain with my own hands that morning. Listened to the rhythm of it hitting the trough. Steady, predictable, honest, unlike the conversation I'd heard the night before. Around 7:15, Daniel came out, stretching like he'd slept just fine. "Morning, Mom," he said casually. "You're up early." I looked at him for a long second. "I've always been up early," I replied. He didn't catch the weight of that. Or maybe he chose not to. Emily joined us 20 minutes later, coffee in hand, sunglasses already on like she was shielding herself from something. Laura stayed inside, probably reviewing spreadsheets. I watched my children move around land they don't own like junior executives touring a future acquisition. And I noticed something else. They weren't asking me about cattle prices. They weren't asking about the oil inspection scheduled next week. They weren't asking about the broken pump on the north well. They weren't interested in stewardship. Only succession. That confirmed it. This wasn't about preserving the ranch. It was about converting it. After breakfast, Daniel said, "We were thinking maybe we could all sit down later and go over some projections." Projections. I wiped my hands on a towel and met his eyes. "I have a meeting in town today," I said calmly. "With who?" Emily asked too quickly. "Business." That was all I gave them. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something simple. They had been planning my ending. Now I was planning my response. And I don't negotiate from weakness. Not on my land. I drove into town like it was any other workday, but my chest felt tight the whole way. Not panic, not grief, just that hard, quiet pressure you get when you realize you've been too generous for too long. Harold Benson's office sits above the old hardware store, same as it has for decades. The stairs creak. The waiting room smells like paper and coffee that's been sitting too long. I'd always found it comforting. That day, it felt like a bunker. Harold came out himself. No assistant, no smile. He took one look at my face and said, "Something happened." I followed him into his office and shut the door behind me. For a second, I couldn't speak. I just set my purse down, sat in the chair across from him, and stared at the framed photo on his wall, him holding a giant trout like it was a trophy. Regular life, normal problems, not this. Then I said it, simple, flat. My kids are trying to spend my ranch while I'm still alive. Harold didn't blink. He didn't look surprised. That almost made me mad. He leaned back, folded his hands, and asked, "How far have they gone?" I told him everything. The dinner table meeting, the appraisal, the maps, and the part one still couldn't quite believe I'd heard with my own ears. "Emily took out a loan," I said, "and she used her expected share as leverage." Harold's jaw tightened just a fraction. "Did you sign anything?" he asked. "No. Have you promised anything in writing? Emails? Texts? Recorded conversations?" "No. Just years of being too damn agreeable." He nodded once, like he'd heard that line before. I sat forward. "I need one answer, Harold. One." He waited. I said, "How protected am I from my own children?" That question hung there, heavy as a fence post. Harold didn't rush to comfort me. He didn't sugarcoat it. He sighed and said, "As protected as your paperwork is." I felt my stomach drop, but at least it was the truth. He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and started writing. "We can put the ranches into a trust," he said. "A strong one. Not some flimsy family agreement they can pressure you into changing." I watched the pen move. It sounded loud in that quiet room. "Trust means I lose everything?" I asked. "No," he said firmly. "Trust means you keep control while you're alive. It means you decide the rules. It means nobody borrows against property they don't own." I exhaled slowly through my nose. He continued, "We set you as the primary trustee. We name a corporate co-trustee for oversight. We lock down mineral rights and leases. We structure distributions so nobody touches principal without approval." "Approval from who?" I asked. "From you," he said. "And if you're not able, from the co-trustee under strict standards." I stared at him. "So they can't just take over?" He shook his head. "Not if we do this right." Then he paused, and his voice got even calmer. "And we add a clause." "A clause," I repeated. "Yes," Harold said. "If any beneficiary tries to assign, leverage, borrow against, or pre-spend their inheritance, if they treat it like a credit line, they forfeit their share." Forfeit. The word landed with a strange kind of relief. Not because I wanted to punish them. Because I wanted to breathe again. I sat back and stared at the window. Outside, traffic rolled by like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. Harold slid a document across the desk. If you want this, we start today. I picked it up, and my hands were steady. That surprised me. I signed the first page. Then the neck. Then the neck. Each signature felt like hammering a post into hard ground. By the time I walked out of his office, the sun was higher and my shoulders felt lighter. Not because my heart wasn't broken. It was, but because I wasn't helpless. And my kids were about to learn something they'd forgotten. I didn't survive droughts, markets, funerals, and men in suits trying to cheat me, just to be pushed aside at my own table. Sunday dinner was coming, and this time I was bringing more than dessert. Sunday dinner was coming, and this time I was bringing more than dessert. I drove back to the ranch slower than usual, watching the fence lines roll by. Every post, every stretch of wire, every gate, I knew where it had been repaired, where it had failed, where I had stood in mud up to my ankles fixing it myself. Ownership isn't just a name on paper. It's memory, it's labor, it's blood under your fingernails. By the time I pulled into the drive, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was thinking strategically. If Emily had already leveraged her expected share, then pressure would come soon. Banks don't wait patiently. Paper trails tighten, which meant they would push harder. Push me to sign something. Push me to clarify intentions. Push me to move assets early for tax efficiency. They thought they were ahead of me. That part almost made me smile. Because what they didn't understand is this. I built this ranch negotiating with men who underestimated me. I know how to sit quietly. I know how to let people believe they're in control. And I know exactly when to close the gate. Sunday dinner wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a reckoning. And they wouldn't see it coming. Sunday came warm and bright. Too bright for what I was about to do. I set the table myself. White plates, cloth napkins, the heavy silverware my mother gave me when we bought the first ranch. The same table where my husband once spread out maps and dreams instead of division plans. I cooked like I always do. Pot roast, fresh rolls, peach cobbler. The smell filled the house with something that used to mean family. They arrived separately. That told me more than they realized. Daniel came in first, confident, already mid-sentence about market timing. Laura followed, carrying her laptop like it was part of her arm. Emily and Chris walked in last. Emily didn't meet my eyes. We sat. Small talk first. Weather, cattle prices, a neighbor's irrigation trouble. Then Daniel cleared his throat. So, Mom, about formalizing things. There it was. I set my fork down gently. Formalizing what? I asked. Laura leaned forward, just structuring the transition in a tax-efficient way. Especially since the appraisal came back strong. The appraisal you ordered without telling me? I said. The table stilled. It was informational, Daniel said quickly. No commitments. And the loan? I asked, looking straight at Emily. Chris stopped chewing. Laura looked confused. Emily went pale. It's temporary, she said. It's smart leverage, using land that isn't yours. It will be, she snapped before she could stop herself. That sentence hung in the air. Will be. I reached beside my chair and lifted the manila folder. Harold had prepared it thoroughly. I placed it in the center of the table. What's this? Daniel asked. My decision. He opened it. The room changed in seconds. His eyes moved, slowed, then stopped. Laura leaned over his shoulder. Emily stood halfway out of her chair. The ranches are now in a protected trust, I said calmly. Effective immediately. Daniel looked up, stunned. You didn't even discuss this with us. I wasn't aware I needed permission. Laura flipped pages. Co-trustee oversight? Distribution limits? What is this? It's structure, I said. And protection. Emily's voice trembled. What about the loan? There's a clause, I continued. If any beneficiary attempts to leverage, assign, or borrow against their inheritance before it's legally theirs, they forfeit it. Forfeit. The word echoed. You wouldn't, Emily whispered. I already did. Silence. Thick, heavy, humbling. Daniel pushed his chair back slightly. This is extreme. No, I replied evenly. Extreme is dividing my land while I'm still alive. Laura's tone sharpened. We were planning responsibly. You were planning prematurely. Emily's hands were shaking now. If the bank finds out. They will, I said. And you should correct it quickly. You're choosing land over your children, she said. I looked at her. No, I'm choosing boundaries over entitlement. No one spoke for a long moment. The only sound was the ticking clock over the stove. Finally Daniel said, "Quieter now, you don't trust us." That hurt. I trusted you, I answered. Until you treated my life like a timeline. That landed. I could see it. They weren't angry anymore. They were uncertain. And uncertainty scares people who were sure they had already won. I stood up and began clearing plates. Dinner was over. No yelling. No dramatic exits. Just a very clear shift in power. For the first time since their father died, I wasn't defending my right to be here. I was enforcing it. Because the moment people start planning your death like a business opportunity, you remind them who still owns the business. I am still here, still signing, still deciding. And the ranch? It isn't transitioning. It's protected. Now tell me, if your own children started dividing your life while you were still living it, would you stay quiet, or would you close the gate? Daniel finally stood, not angry, unsteady. You're making this permanent, he said. There's no trust left in this room. I looked at him carefully. There wasn't, I answered. That's why I had to put it on paper. That hit him harder than any accusation. Emily wiped at her face, frustrated tears she didn't want anyone to see. You could have talked to us, she said. I tried, I replied quietly. You were too busy calculating. Chris spoke for the first time in several minutes. We were thinking ahead. So was I said. Laura crossed her arms. This is going to divide the family. I let out a slow breath. No, I said. Planning my death divided the family. Silence again. Heavy. Real. I walked back to the table and placed my hands flat against the wood. This ranch fed you, I said. It paid your tuition. It covered your mistakes. It absorbed droughts, market crashes, and your father's hospital bills. It is not a lottery ticket. Daniel looked down. Emily looked small. And for the first time, they didn't look like heirs. They looked like children who had misjudged their mother. I am not your exit strategy, I said calmly. And that was the moment it finally settled over them. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't negotiable. The ranch wasn't changing hands. But the rules had. They left my house that night like they were leaving a courtroom. Quiet, tight-lipped, careful. No one hugged me the way they used to. No one asked if I was okay. They didn't look at me like a mother. They looked at me like a problem that had changed the terms. The next morning, the ranch felt the same, but I didn't. The sun came up. The cattle moved. The wind pushed through the pasture grass like it always has. But my phone started ringing like a warning bell. Daniel called first. Mom, we need to talk about reversing that clause. You mean the part that stops you from borrowing against land you don't own? I asked. He sighed like I was being unreasonable. You're humiliating Emily. No, I said. Emily humiliated herself the moment she used my death as collateral. A pause. Then the real truth slid out. If she defaults, it affects all of us. There it was. Not concern for me, not respect. Fear of consequences. Laura texted 2 hours later. This is going to destroy the family. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I typed back. Planning my death did that. I'm just responding. She didn't answer. By Tuesday, Emily showed up unannounced. No sunglasses, no confidence. Just that tight face people get when they've been cornered by their own choices. She stood in my kitchen like she still belonged there. Like she still had leverage. You can't just lock everything up, she said. I kept my voice calm. I can. And I did. Her eyes flashed. I'm your daughter. And I'm still alive. She clenched her jaw. I needed that loan. We had a window. Rates were favorable. It was smart. Smart doesn't mean right, I said. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. You're choosing a piece of paper over me, she whispered. I shook my head. No, I'm choosing the truth over entitlement. That word, entitlement, hit her like a slap. Because she knew it was accurate. She didn't come to apologize. She came to negotiate. What if I refinance? She asked quickly. What if I remove any reference to the ranch? You should do that anyway, I said. Because it was wrong. But will you remove the clause? I held her gaze. No. Her face crumpled for half a second. Not sadness. Panic. Because the clause wasn't a punishment to her. It was a threat to her plans. She left without hugging me. And I didn't chase her. That week, I learned something else. When you take away people's certainty, they show you who they really are. Daniel tried logic. Laura tried guilt. Emily tried pressure. Chris tried silence. I got a call from a man I didn't know, some financial advisor Daniel apparently trusted, talking about legacy preservation and smooth transitions. I listened to him for maybe 10 seconds. Then I said, "If my son sent you, tell him this isn't a negotiation." And I hung up. That night I sat at my desk and pulled out my husband's old ranch ledger. The one with his handwriting. The one he used to keep tucked in the drawer like it was sacred. I traced his name with my finger. And I thought about what legacy actually means. It isn't land. It isn't money. It's what you do with what you've been given. And I knew what I had to do next. Because the truth was simple. Even if my children behaved tomorrow, the ranch was still vulnerable to their future desperation. To their spouses, to their debts, to their bad decisions. Love is not a legal structure. So I made another appointment with Harold. And this time I didn't walk in heartbroken. I walked in clear. I want most of the estate protected beyond them, I told him. Harold didn't flinch. Explain, he said. A foundation, I replied. Land preservation, conservation easements. Keep the ranch intact. Keep it from being chopped into parcels and sold like scraps. He nodded slowly, writing. And the ranch hands, I added. The people who kept this place alive when my husband died. They deserve profit sharing, real security. Harold's pen paused for a beat, like he respected that. And scholarships, I said. In my husband's name. For kids who actually want agriculture, veterinary science, land management. Kids who will treat land like responsibility, not a prize. Harold looked up. Your children will take this badly. I let out a breath. They already did. He waited. What do you want them to receive? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Because part of me still wanted to believe they'd come around. Then I remembered Emily's voice in the hallway. It's not like she's going to live forever. And I felt my spine straighten. They'll receive something, I said. Enough to be fine, but not control, not the keys, not the ability to sell, not the ability to leverage it again. Harold nodded once. Respect decides inheritance, I said quietly. Not blood. When I walked out of his office, the sun was blazing. And for the first time since that dinner table betrayal, I felt peace. Not because I'd won, because I'd finally stopped begging to be valued. I wasn't dividing the ranch. I was dividing access, and my children were about to learn the difference. I didn't tell them right away. Not about the foundation, not about the scholarships, not about the profit sharing for the ranch hands. I let them sit in uncertainty. Because uncertainty has a way of teaching faster than lectures ever do. 2 weeks passed. No Sunday dinners, no casual drop-ins, only careful phone calls and short texts that sounded like business emails instead of family. Then Daniel called a meeting. Not at my house, at his. That alone told me he still thought this was something he could manage. I drove there anyway, not because I owed him. Because I wanted to see their faces when I finished what I started. They were all there. Daniel, Laura, Emily, Chris. No laptops this time. No yellow legal pad. Just tension. Daniel spoke first. We've been discussing this as a family. I almost smiled at that. As a family, you've restructured everything without collaboration, he continued. That affects us. Yes, I said calmly. It does. Laura leaned forward. We deserve transparency. You had access, I replied. You used it poorly. Emily's jaw tightened. What else did you change? She asked. There it was. Not why, not how are you feeling. What else? I folded my hands in my lap. Most of the estate, I said evenly, is being placed into a land preservation foundation. Silence. Daniel blinked. A what? A foundation. The ranch will remain intact. It cannot be divided, sold in parcels, or leveraged. Laura's face drained of color. Emily shook her head slowly. You're giving it away? I'm protecting it. Chris finally spoke. From us? I held his gaze. Yes. That word hit harder than anything else. Daniel stood up. So strangers get control over what we grew up on? Strangers didn't try to borrow against it, I replied. Laura's voice rose. You're choosing employees over your own blood? No, I said. I'm rewarding loyalty. Emily looked stunned. And us? You will receive distributions, I said. Enough to live comfortably. Enough to invest. Enough to be secure. But not control? Daniel pressed. Not control. He ran a hand through his hair. This is revenge. That word almost made me laugh. No, I said quietly. Revenge would have been cutting you out completely. They went silent again, because they realized something. I could have. Emily's voice broke slightly. So this is permanent. Yes. Laura looked at Daniel like she wanted him to fix it. He couldn't, because this wasn't emotional anymore. It was legal, structured, locked. You're breaking tradition, Daniel said. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm protecting it. I leaned forward for the first time. You thought inheritance was automatic. No one argued. You treated my life like a countdown clock. No one denied it, and you leveraged something that wasn't yours. Emily looked down. I softened my tone, just slightly. This ranch survived droughts, oil crashes, your father's illness. It will survive this too. Daniel sat back down. So that's it, he said quietly. We just wait. No, I answered. You build your own legacies. Laura crossed her arms. And if we don't agree? I stood up. You already showed me what happens when you plan without me. The room felt smaller, heavier. I walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, I added without turning around. Scholarships will be given in your father's name. Agricultural students. Kids who understand land isn't a shortcut. No one spoke. And the ranch hands, I continued, will receive profit sharing. They never tried to sell me. That stung. I knew it did. I finally turned back toward them. I am still alive, I said. And I am still in charge. Daniel looked older in that moment. Not angry, just shaken. Emily looked uncertain. Laura looked calculating. Chris looked quiet. And for the first time since that Sunday dinner months ago, they looked like people who understood something had shifted permanently. Inheritance is not guaranteed, respect is not automatic, and control belongs to the one who earned it. I walked out without waiting for permission. Because I wasn't the delay anymore. I was the decision. And the ranch? It will outlive all of us. But it will not be divided by impatience. Now I want to ask you something. If your own children treated your life like a timeline, would you still hand them the keys? Or would you protect what you built? Tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe respect should come before inheritance, stay with me. The ranch is quiet again. Not empty, not broken, just steady, the way it was before anyone started measuring it like a prize. Daniel doesn't call as often now. Emily refinanced the loan, quietly, no announcement, just a short message, it's handled. Laura keeps her distance, and you know what? That's fine, because something changed in me that Sunday. I stopped trying to be the agreeable mother. I stopped confusing love with access. I stopped believing blood automatically meant loyalty. This land taught me something my children forgot. You don't harvest what you didn't plant. You don't fence what you didn't build. And you don't spend what isn't yours. I am still here, still walking the barns at dawn, still signing my name on contracts, still deciding, the ranch will outlive me, but it will not be divided by impatience. Respect decides inheritance, not entitlement, not assumption, not pressure. So let me ask you, if your family started planning your exit while you were still living your life, would you stay quiet, or would you change the contract? And if you believe dignity comes before inheritance, stay with me, because some lessons are learned late, but they're learned strong.
Your voice matters here. Share your story below. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Have you ever lived through something similar? Share in the comments. Your voice matters here.